Good morning, Dr. Sufran Smith. I'm going to call you Sufran. It's so wonderful to have you at the cave this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege for me to be here.
Yes, and unfortunately, because of load shedding stage 6 in South Africa, you are unable to switch on your camera, which is a pity. I'm lucky where I am. I don't have load shedding at the moment, so at least there's one face. Sorry about that. That sucks, but that's the reality in South Africa, and we just have to deal with it. But at least your voice is here. And that's the most important part, because today you are going to share valuable information with our designated social workers in South Africa pertaining to sexual abuse, because you are a forensic social worker and an expert in the field. But before I begin, we're going to deal with 2 questions today. The first one being about recanting. But before we go there, maybe you can just share with the designated social workers who's logging in to hear who you are, what's your background, your credentials, just so they know that they can trust what you have to say regarding this topic.
Okay, thank you, Elmine. Like Elmine said, I'm a forensic social worker. I joined the police in 2001 as a forensic social worker, but then I wasn't trained yet. And in 2002, I started with training, and I did a course back in the days with NWU Potchefstroom. Unfortunately, it wasn't accredited. And then Northwest University started to present a master's degree in forensic social work. So I did that, which was accredited. And then I did my PhD. I left the police after 11 years of doing forensic social work.
Sure.
And currently, I'm employed at the Northwest University as program manager for forensic social work. So
wow.
That's in short
Brilliant.
what I do.
And you're a published author also in the field. You supervise postgrad students in the field of forensic practice. So, 11 years in the South African police doing forensic assessments. I know personally, because that's how you and I first met, when I was a designated social worker practicing full-time, and you assessed some clients on a case that I managed. So you truly are an expert and very busy. Anyone who knows academics knows that academics work very hard and are very busy. So again, just to emphasize how grateful we are here at the cave that you made some time available on this Saturday morning to speak with us. And the purpose of the cave, just once again, is to be a space for designated social workers in South Africa, to give them a space of rest, but also a space where they can learn and just sharpen their tools, so to speak, when they practice doing the most important work, I think, which is protecting children in South Africa. So thank you for your time.
Definitely. It's just a pleasure.
So the first question, Sufran, is when designated social workers work on cases of child sexual abuse or allegations of child sexual abuse, oftentimes children make disclosures of sexual abuse. And then somewhere in the process, these children, some of them recant. So in other words, they take back what they said. So, no, I didn't mean that, or no, that's no longer the truth. I wasn't sexually abused. I would like you to please explain to some of the designated social workers who might not know, what does that mean? What does recanting mean? Is that normal in a sexual abuse case? Does that in fact mean the child is lying, or is that just a normal part of the process?
Okay, yes, I mean, that's something that's actually very common, and it happens quite often. And then people tend to say, especially in court, they would say, yes, but the child's actually lying, or the child's not a reliable witness, things like that. So in short, because it's actually a very complicated process to explain, but in short, disclosure takes place in phases. So it's not a once-off thing. A child will not simply come to an adult and say, listen, I've been sexually abused, and they tell you everything. It does not work like that. And often the court expects children to do that, but it doesn't happen like that. So let me start with what recanting really is. So recanting, and there's a difference between recanting and denial. So denial is also part of the phases of disclosure, where you will start off with your assessment, or you will get a report that a child might have been sexually abused, and you start off with your assessment, and where you ask the child directly, tell me, did something happen? And the child says no. Or even during your assessment, the child will tell you, this is what happened. 1, 2, and 3 happened to me. And then when you terminate the session, the child tells you something like, oh, what I told you just now was a lie. I was just kidding. Or I was, it was something that didn't happen. I was just kidding. I was lying. It didn't happen. That's not recanting, that's denial. So the child is denying what happened, and that's also normal. It's part of the normal phases of disclosure. Recanting is where the child retracts a previous allegation that was formally made and maintained over a period of time. So the child will tell you, listen, I've been sexually abused, and the child gives you detailed information. And the process is well on its way. It's an arrest has been made. And now all of a sudden, the child tells you, listen, it didn't happen. I was lying. Or they can even say, I was told what to say. And I'm sure you are all familiar with the case that happened where the child said that she was lying. It was forensic social workers were in the news for all the wrong reasons.
Yes, it was a recent case.
It was a recent case where the child said, and the father was actually
imprisoned.
He was and then she said, but I was lying. Yeah. And the case, they revisited the case, and once again, he was found guilty, and important, there was medical evidence. But besides that, that's a typical example of a child recanting. And that's usually after the process has started and they suffered negative consequences because of their disclosure. For instance, a father that has been arrested, or a mother telling the child, listen, see what you've caused. You've put the family through this trouble. Your father's arrested. Who's going to take care of us? So usually, after a child has been threatened or even embarrassed by the abuse, or they feel responsible for the abuse, or they feel responsible for the consequences of their disclosure, they will recant their statement. So it's actually something that happens very often, and it's normal, and it's part of the phases of disclosure.
And so that's very important to highlight. So if designated social workers work on a case like this and a child recants, because it's a normal part of the procedure, like you explained all the reasons why, it shouldn't be, one should be cautious to just say, okay, the child now says it didn't happen, and therefore it didn't happen, we close the case. That would be irresponsible. Yes. Would you agree?
Definitely, yes, it would be.
Okay, so
the child is still in danger. That's a sad thing. The child is still in danger because we all know that the abuse will simply not just stop.
No, definitely. And but designated social workers need to have this knowledge. So I'm hoping that many of them who maybe don't have this knowledge will listen to this interview and listen to what you have to say as an expert in forensic social work, to realize that just because a child recants, and just because an attorney might use that as a joker card, so to speak, in a case, that doesn't mean you surrender and you say, okay, now the child's recanted, so we're just leaving. That would be irresponsible, and I would go as far as to say a form of malpractice, to then just simply close the case or leave it, because now, like you've explained, recanting is a normal part of the process.
Yes. Unfortunately, the sad reality also in the criminal court, the child needs to testify. So if a child, and that happened to me several times in practice, that actually during the court case, during the hearing, the child will recant and say, listen, it didn't happen. Or it did happen, but it was someone else. And then, unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do because the child must testify in a criminal hearing. And then I always recommend that you follow the route of the children's court, because the principle in the children's court is not to prove beyond reasonable doubt, but to act in the child's best interest.
And balance of probabilities, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So the risk assessment kind of dictates the outcome, I think. Yeah. So okay, that's interesting. Okay, but the bottom line is recanting is different than denial. Recanting is a retracting of a statement, either identifying a new alleged perpetrator or simply saying that nothing happened at all.
Yes.
And it's a normal part of the process, and it should be treated as such. And these children should also not be, how can I say, not bullied, but they shouldn't be cross with a child, you know, the investigating social worker, the designated social worker, if that happens, but rather recognize it as a normal step in the process of disclosure. Am I right? Or
Yes, and support the child and
yes.
safeguard the child. What we also should remember, sometimes children do lie. It happens. But we always have to look at reasons. A child will not simply lie about the sexual abuse.
Yes.
So I always say, look at things in context. Look at things in context. And if it happens that a child recants, do a proper investigation and establish possible reasons why the child would recant. And that's usually when they suffer negative consequences or when they are traumatized by the court process. However, sometimes children do lie, or that, especially adolescents, they can. I'm not saying always, but it's something that you have to look at. It's a hypothesis that you have to examine, but always look at reasons. It's also, in my opinion, a child lying about sexual abuse, that's a cry for help.
Yes.
That's an indication of something is not right.
Yeah,
so
if it's a lie,
it
could be something else. Yeah, because
it could be something else, and then the child also needs support.
Absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to add to the topic of children recanting and sexual abuse cases that you think might help a designated social worker out there in dealing with these cases? Or before I move to the second question?
Well, like I said, always view cases in context, get a holistic picture, and it's always good to work in a multi-professional team. So to have a team approach and focus on aspects like, what type of information did the child give me? Could the child give me sensory information, things about what happened? And then all of a sudden, the child said, no, nothing happened. Then this is most probably a case of recanting. Where the child struggled to give you information, where the child constantly contradicted him or herself, where things didn't add up. And now the child tells you, listen, I lied because I wanted 1, 2, and 3, or I was angry at my dad or whatever. Then most probably it's a case of just lying. Or sometimes children do get coached, especially in parental alienation cases, where they do get, but then usually you will also, it will come out early in your assessment, there will be red lights.
Yeah. So these children where there are allegations of sexual abuse, of course, a forensic social worker or forensic psychologist is normally involved to do the forensic assessment, which is quite different to other standard assessments.
Yes.
And during that assessment, because of the techniques employed, it should surface whether there's a likelihood that the child is being coached or not. So
yes.
So forensic social workers have a very important role to play in these cases. Okay.
Yes.
The next question, and there's a lot written on it, but maybe you can just comment. As we all know, children go through different developmental phases, and sometimes children engage in behavior which, according to the literature, is deemed normal sexual curiosity, for instance. But could you maybe give us a breakdown in terms of when would sexual behavior be considered abnormal in a particular developmental phase, and that requires social work investigation at least?
Okay. That's also another, don't want to say difficult, because it's not that difficult, complex. It's a complex a question to answer, especially in such a short time of period. But there's actually no consensus amongst professionals as to what is actually normal and healthy and typical child sexual behaviors. Even professionals sometimes do not agree on that. But what literature indicates to us is that most children will engage in sexual behaviors at some time during their childhood. So they are curious and they will most probably engage in this type of behavior. And usually children also learn to conceal this behavior that adults disapprove of. So then they start to do it in private, or where simply not in public, or where they will be seen. So what's normal, what's abnormal? Usually it's normal. I can say it's normal and explorative when both children consented to the behavior. Now also we must remember that children with consent, consent also has different parameters, but when both children agree, and when they are more or less on the same cognitive level. So when it's a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, or a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, when they're in the same cognitive or developmental level, more or less from the same age group. I mean, it's not normal when you have a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old. Then it's not normal anymore.
So the first thing that a designated social worker should be aware of is the age gap, in terms of
the age gap. Very important. Yes.
So if there is sexual interaction between two children, one of the first things to consider is, are they from the same developmental phase, or are we talking about a 5 or 6 or 7-year age gap between the kids, which then should be your first red flag?
Yes. Unless it's a child with a developmental delay, a 15-year-old functioning on the level of a 7-year-old. But then that will also, it will come out during your investigation. But generally, yes, we look at the age. We look at the age and the cognitive. Are they more or less in the same developmental phase?
So that's
Yeah, no, then also this behavior shouldn't cause any emotional problems. Usually it's explorative. It's explorative of nature. They want to explore, they do it out of curiosity and not to satisfy a sexual need.
Okay, so the first thing is look at the age gap. If there's a large age gap, that's your first red flag. Second of all, if the purpose of the sexual engagement is simply to explore, that might be considered normal. But as soon as it is to achieve sexual gratification or satisfaction, then that's a second red flag. Excellent.
Then there's a definite red flag. Also, the behavior is usually not a social taboo in the community. Although we do not encourage sexual contact between children, we know that they will explore and that they will have questions and that they are curious.
Yeah.
But in all cultures, sexual intercourse, sexual contact, genital sexual contact between children is frowned upon. Often they say it's acceptable in our culture. Well, research also, I've done extensive research in different cultures, and it's a social taboo in all cultures. So they simply offenders will simply use it as an excuse to say, but in my culture it's acceptable, or I'm preparing the child to be a good wife one day for her husband, or something like that. It is So in all cultures it is frowned upon. Also very important that neither of the participants are forced or bribed to participate. So when one child tells another child, show me yours and then I'll show you mine, or engage in 1, 2, and 3. Otherwise, if you do not, I'm going to tell your mom that you did 1, 2, and 3, or I am going to hurt you, or whatever. So no force, no bribery, no coercion should be involved.
Excellent.
So, and then usually this behavior will also diminish when reprimanded by adults. For instance, a mother walking in on her 2 children where they are busy with a sexual activity, meaning show me yours, I'll show you mine, things like that, or 2 friends. And the mother has a conversation with the kids and tell them, listen, this is not how things work. That place is private. We do it in private. It's not, you are not allowed to touch someone else's body. They are not allowed to touch you. And she has an informative conversation with them. Then usually this behavior will also diminish.
So the moment it doesn't and it persists, then that's a red flag. Okay.
Then also, it's a red light. So yes, masturbation, and even young children do masturbate. People always say now, 5-year-old masturbating, it's not normal. It is. It is. Masturbation is normal. Touching of their own genitals is normal. Visual curiosity about body parts, including other people's body parts, that's normal. Showing genitals to other children or adults, but also it decreases with age and after being reprimanded. So those are things that are always that's normal. Parents often tell me now, a 5-year-old masturbating, that's not normal. Where did they see that? Where did they see that? They had to see it from someone, so it's not normal. And then I always use this example of, okay, your kid is 5 years old. Tell me, do your kid pick his nose? Do your kid pick his nose? And then they will say yes. And then I always ask them, but where did they see it? Did they see that from you? And then they are very shocked and say, no, definitely they discovered it themselves. And that's the same with masturbation. It's something that they discover themselves. So that's totally normal. If you have a child, a young child even, that's masturbating, it's normal. However, it becomes abnormal when they do it in an aggressive manner. When it how can I say, when it becomes the only thing that they think of. When they start
an obsession, maybe
an obsession, when it becomes obsessive, then it's not normal anymore.
And if they hurt themselves in the process of masturbating excessively.
Yes. And also, yes, if they masturbate with objects and penetrate themselves with objects, then it's not normal anymore.
It's a red flag. And
it's a red flag, yes.
Children using all sorts of objects on the playground, say pre-primary school, to sexually stimulate, is that
yes, but also we should be again cautious to say that this child was sexually abused or something like that, because children also masturbate to soothe themselves. So once again, then I will have to look into the matter. What is it that upsets this child? What is it that makes this child so anxious that the child needs self-soothing behavior on the playground or whatever? So then, yes, definitely I will do an assessment to establish if there's any other emotional problems involved. But
so one would have to consider all the variables of a specific case to come to the most truthful conclusion. Just one question on that. So one of the red flags you said is when a child does sexual or engages in sexual interaction, and it's not for exploratory purposes, but for sexual gratification purposes, it's a red flag. However, now when we talk about masturbation, you say it's normal for children to masturbate for the purpose of sexual gratification. But when should a parent, or when should a social worker, when a designated social worker gets a case like that, say the school phones and says, there's this boy or this girl at school, and they are constantly either masturbating in the bathroom, on the playground, or they are using toys to, help them masturbate. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a red flag, because first of all, I'm sure, let's look at the normal behavior again. It diminishes after being reprimanded by an adult. So I'm sure the first time that this child was caught on the playgrounds, masturbating or wherever, that child would have been reprimanded. And hopefully they had a informative conversation with that child, telling them, listen, this is your body, what you are doing is normal. However, we do it in private, and, the whole educational talk. And now the child still continues with that. So then it's not okay anymore. And also, like I said, when a child uses instruments to assist during masturbation, that's also not not normal anymore. So and you will definitely do some other intervention.
And if it interrupts other activities, so if a child, whether it's very young, say let's say 5 years old, or whether it's a 17-year-old boy, for instance, if masturbation becomes so prioritized that the child cannot do homework or whatever. So if daily normal
yeah.
routine activities are interrupted because of a preoccupation or
Yes,
obsession with
yes,
sexual activity, masturbation, whatever, then it
yes,
is a red flag, especially after being reprimanded as well, or being talked to or counseled. If it
yes,
cannot
yes.
stop, then it is a red flag. Okay.
Definitely, when it interrupts your daily functioning.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So when it's exploratory, and when children heed warnings in terms of where, when, and how, it's normal. But if children do it, for the purpose of sexual gratification, very young children, when it's two children involved, when there's a large age gap, when it becomes obsessive and persistent, when objects are used and harm is caused either on another child or self, when there's threats involved, these are all red flags. Would that be an adequate summary?
Yes.
And obviously, Sufran, with this very short interview, we are not saying that this is a definite and finite list or parameters to consider in these cases. It's a topic that requires perhaps a follow-up conversation. It requires consultation of literature, research, etc. But those would be some basic guidelines that a designated social worker can keep in mind when he or she receives a call from school or a concerned mother. But that they should absolutely also consider the regulations and the guidelines provided by the Children's Act, as well as published literature on this topic.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, or to summarize, sexual behavior that involves children who are developmentally dissimilar, that's definitely, it's a red flag, where there's coercion involved or control are used by one of the children. So, also problematic sexual interactions is also characterized by dominance and coercion, threats, force, aggression, compulsivity, things like that. Then it's not normal anymore.
Okay, no, excellent. Very tough topic, but absolutely a reality, especially globally, but especially in South Africa.
Globally.
We have been labeled the rape capital of the world. So, sexual abuse in all its forms, it's just rampant in South Africa. And even when a designated social worker sees, or receives a case where this kind of sexual behavior among kids are reported, it doesn't necessarily mean it is that a child has been sexually abused. There are always multiple hypotheses that have to be tested. It could be that the child was exposed to pornography, a whole host of explanations.
Yes, yes.
But sexual abuse should not be, scrapped. It could definitely be an explanation. But it's important for designated social work to remain aware of what is normal and what could be considered abnormal, and when do you start doing an investigation. Excellent.
Yes, definitely.
We are running out of time, as always, here at the Cave, but you've really enlightened us today in terms of recanting and normal versus abnormal sexual behavior among children, whether the two kids or just the one child, on their own. I would like to conclude this interview with you to ask you, do you have any words of encouragement for our designated social workers out there who are really working hard trying to protect children in a resource-constrained country, and with a whole host of other risks that I'm not going to elaborate on here? But do you have words of encouragement for our designated social workers watching this interview right now?
Well, words of encouragement that I can share with them is just hang in there. You are making a difference. You are really making a difference. And, I was thinking this morning about a case that I was involved in. And at that time, I thought, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing what's expected of me. And I didn't really think that I didn't think that I'm making this huge impact. And 2 months later, the father phoned me. He was very angry at the time when I intervened. And then 2 months later, he thanked me and he said, just want to say thank you so much for what I've done, because now he's actually aware of what was wrong in the whole family setting, and he appreciates what I've done for them. And he said, yes, he was angry at the beginning, but I really made a difference. And even if you make a difference in just one child's life, that's a difference that you made. Yes. So hang in there, and one day you will be awarded for the work that you've done. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's my words of encouragement.
Thank you so much. I believe it's going to make a difference in at least one designated social worker's work life when they hear that message. Dr. Sufran Smith, thank you very much for your time and your valuable insights that you shared with us today. I really think I'll schedule another interview with you. There's lots to talk about when it comes to signs and impact of sexual abuse on children. So thank you very much and good luck with the load shedding.
Thank you. And it was a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.